Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this TradeStation Masterclass. Today, we're going to do a little bit of easy language and how you can customize TradeStation studies to be exactly what you want them to be. Before I get started, the usual introductions and disclosures. My name is Jesus Nava. For those that are new to the Masterclass series, I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. For me, it's always a pleasure to be here talking about the TradeStation technology and showing you how you can take advantage of it. Today's title is Accelerate Analysis with Status Line through Easy Language. If you're not really familiar with TradeStation, this may be a little bit confusing, but the status line is something we have in charting, and we're going to use Easy Language to modify the information that is there. Keep in mind that every symbol and idea that we talk about is for educational purposes only, that these are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, that active trading is not suitable for everyone. If anybody needs additional information on these disclosures, please visit tradestation.com/important-information, and you'll find all the disclosure links on that page. All right, let's go ahead and get started. To provide some sort of an introduction to today's class, let's talk a little bit about the status line. The status line is located at the top of each chart and subgraph. We're going to go over to the TradeStation platform, and I'll point to it so you know exactly what it is if you're not really familiar with what or where it is. But it's at the top of every chart analysis window, providing you data, what symbol you're looking at, if you're looking at any studies or strategies, symbol data like open, high, low, close, volume, all that information is going to be at the very top of every single chart. But if you're using studies, for example, like a moving average or a Bollinger Band, the status line will usually provide those values in the status line. In addition to, having the plotted line inside the graph and showing you the graphical representation of that moving average, you'll also see the actual number inside the status line. Whenever you're modifying parameters for any studies, those parameters will also be displayed inside of that plots, inside of that status line. And that sometimes is convenient because you know exactly what parameters you picked for that chart without having to go through the menus. Yes, you can go into the menus and see what parameters you've set any study to, but it's very convenient to see those parameters at the top of the chart. You can also enable the status line in the Customize Indicator Style tab. You can change the font size, you can change the placement, you can change a lot on it. But what is the status line used for in easy language? How we can modify the information that is up there to our benefit. One of the things you can do is displaying chart alerts. When anything is happening, it's better to have a great visual. You know exactly where the information is. And the status lines, since is at the top of every TradeStation chart, seems to be very appropriate to have any alert messages show up. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Here's an example. Here's an example based on the MAC diff. If it crosses over 0, then we're going to plot bullish alert and then set the color to cyan. But then if the MAC diff crosses below 0, then we're going to plot bearish alert, and it's going to be a color magenta. What I want you guys to take a note of is what is inside of plot 10, because this is what controls the behavior of the status line, or what is going to be displayed inside of the status line. Whenever you use a plot statement, and inside that plot statement, which is inside parentheses, you have this bullish alert inside quotations, Easy Language will treat that as a text, like a text plot, and it'll just plot whatever you put inside quotations at the top of your status line. So this is a very quick way for you to add information at the very top if you need to display an information at the very top on the status line. We're going to look at an example so you can see that. So one of the ways that, or one of the reasons why we would want to do this is because we want to see alerts and we want to see particular modes of the market. And sometimes by looking at the study, it may not be as clear as it could be. You can also use a status line for descriptive values. A lot of times, if you want to add a certain calculation or certain calculated value over to the status line, that is something you can do. And you can plot it up there without occupying a subgraph under your, for example, if you're interested in knowing what the RSI indicator is telling you about any security, but instead of having the RSI take up a whole chunk of space at the bottom of your chart analysis, you only display the RSI value on the status line. Very convenient. You can have it there on every single chart. It is something that we're going to work with today. Here's an example. This example plots the MACD value as a MACD text, but it also provides the value. So this is a way for you to plot that value of MACD at the very top of your chart. And we're going to look at different ways in which you can, this is just for clarity purposes. A lot of times we see those values at the very top. We don't know what they are, but we can create labels for them. And I think that's it. I think that's all the information I'm going to go over here in PowerPoint. I'm going to switch over to my TradeStation platform so we can look at examples, applications of what I've just talked about. And there's nothing better than doing something in real time, right? Okay. This is my TradeStation desktop. I'm looking at a chart. It doesn't matter what security I'm looking at. In this case, this is AT&T. The symbol is trading at 27.54. But the status line that we have been mentioning since the very beginning is this line of information that you show or that you see right here at the top of a chart. It's called the status line. It's turned on by default. You don't have to enable it. You don't have to modify it if you don't want to. So what I'm going to show you today is just nice things to have, nice things that enhances your visual and sometimes enhances the alert monitoring. First of all, how do you make changes to it? If I double click on my background, it'll take me to this customize window dialog that has a separate status line tab for it. Here is where I can either show it or not. If I uncheck it here and I click OK, you can see that whole line just disappears. Maybe that's your preference. Maybe you want to see your clean chart without all that information up there. Let me go back in there. I'm going to double click on my background one more time. I'm going to turn it on. You can choose the information that you want to see there. A lot of these don't show up many times. For example, correction or the letter C, it's something that doesn't happen all the time. But if you do see it, it'll show like this C at the bottom of this dialog. There's a preview at the bottom that shows you a lot of these indicators and how they show up. So the C will show up as an orange letter C in a little box as part of the status line. And all these right here, the SA is strategy automation, the A is alert, the C is correction, PD is pending data, or TA is, of course, a trading app. You can uncheck or check any of those items to be displayed up there. In addition to that, you have all this other information that is right here in the selected box. So you have the symbol, the exchange, trade size. A lot of this information I may not need if I'm trading. I haven't made any changes to the default. But for example, if you don't really care about trade size, you can remove that, or the trade exchange, remove that. If I'm not really interested in the bid size, remove that, or the ask size, I'm going to remove that as well. If exchange is something that it's not really something you want to look at because you're always trading particular symbols, you can disable that. And one thing, do not set it as a default unless you think this is all you need. Setting as default is when you've made a good decision about the items you need and the ones you don't need. Make your selections, and then you set it as a default so that every time that you open up a new chart, it'll have exactly what you selected. But in this case, I've just modified this single chart. If you don't put a check here on set as default, I'm only making the changes on this chart, which sometimes look at it, see if it's the way you like it, and then set it as a default so you don't have to struggle with knowing exactly what was there before. I'm going to click OK, and now you can see that I have a reduced status line. It's not as long as it was before because I've just left the items that I'm interested in. And that's the whole purpose of this class, for you to put up there the information that you want to look at and maybe use a little bit of EasyLanguage to format it in the way that it makes sense for you. Let me show you one thing that we can do. I'm going to go here to, this is the first example. I'm going to go to one of the studies that is built into TradeStation, and we're going to take a look. Okay, let me bring it over here. It opened up in my second monitor. Let's go ahead and pull up the DMI, just as an example. DMI is a study that plots three different lines. You see the three lines right there at the bottom. One of the lines is DMI plus, which is the blue line or the cyan line. The DMI minus is the red line, and the ADX is the yellow line. You notice what I just did? I just clicked here in the background of my chart, because many times, even though I'm very used to using the ADX, sometimes I forget which one's which. So if you click on the background of the chart and you get this little data tips window, it helps you remind you of what the labels are. You can look at them at the bottom of that data tips window. So DMI plus is cyan, DMI minus is the red one, and ADX is the yellow one. Those same labels that you see right there at the bottom could be added right here on the status line. Oh, that's one thing that I didn't note before, is that when you have a study that goes under the chart as a separate subgraph, it'll have its own status line. It gets affected with the same settings. So whatever settings you specify, when you double click on the background of the chart, those settings will also apply to the additional status lines that are here. But when I look at these numbers, the 2238 that shows up right here in my status line corresponds to the 2238 that shows right here on the far right. So the same values that you see for each one of the lines plotted by the study, you're going to show them right here on the status line. But there's no specific label. So I would have to remember that the cyan is the DMI plus, the red is the DMI minus, and I would have to remember that the yellow is the ADX. If I don't want to continuously go back here and check to see which one's which, I can add those labels. So that's the type of modification that we're talking about. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to right click on this indicator, and I'm going to go here to edit EasyLanguage for DMI. That's the way that you open up any indicator that is applied with TradeStation and make your own personal modifications. I'm going to go to edit EasyLanguage for DMI. Okay, you're going to see a ton of information here. This is the actual code that runs the DMI. A lot of the things here we're not going to modify. So if it's a little bit overwhelming for you, all this text, that's fine, because we're just going to make a few edits. We're going to focus on three lines, plot lines 21 to 23, which are my plot statements. These plot statements in EasyLanguage are the ones that are responsible for drawing each one of the lines. And these names, DMI plus, DMI minus, and ADX, is what carries that value, that calculated value that we saw not only in the plot on the right-hand side, but we also saw that number inside of the status line. So if we were to add plots here that do not plot actual lines, that's the key here. So that's what we're going to do. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that whenever you add plot statements, TradeStation will plot them in the order that you specify them. Now, if I wanted to add a label to DMI plus, for example, this is my plot number 1. If I wanted to create a label that says DMI plus, that would have to be before plot number 1, because it's before the number. You know what I'm saying? So you have a label, and then you have a number. Then you have another label, and then you have another number. So it would have to be before the number 1, and before plot number 1, I believe you can do a plot 0 if I'm not mistaken. But what I'm trying to say is that we have consecutive numbers here, 1, 2, 3, and it doesn't provide us the space that we need to add these labels. So what we're going to do is we're going to change these plot numbers to something different. Before I make any modifications to this DMI indicator, let me go ahead and save it as a div1. I always recommend you do this, especially if you're learning about EasyLanguage and you want to start making some modifications. You modify a copy of the original, and that way you don't mess up your original studies. So I'm going to click File and Save As, and all I'm going to do to this indicator is I'm going to add a prefix, which I'm adding to all my masterclass indicators at MC, and right at the very end, I'm just going to say status line so that I remember this is the DMI study that I created for the status line. I'm going to click OK. Now the tab has the name that I picked, and now I can make modifications. And what I wanted to do is make this plot number 2, plot number 4, and then plot number 6. That way, I can add a plot 1 before plot 2, then add a plot 3 before plot 4, and I can add a plot 5 before plot 6. Everybody understands that? That way, I can use a similar example to the one that I saw in the PowerPoint, where I open up my parentheses and then I just plot the text that I want to be displayed in the status line. So plot 1, this is going to be DMI plus, that's what my text is going to say. I don't need a label per se, although it does help you identify which one's which. Let me show you first without the label, and then I'll show you how you can make it a little bit more understandable when it comes to formatting these plots. Plot number 3 is going to be DMI minus. Remember that the expression has to be inside quotations. We're using the syntax of EasyLanguage where, the expression is inside parentheses and the expression or the statement ends in a semicolon. So don't forget that semicolon, open parentheses. And the last one is the ADX. I need to enter this inside quotations. There we go. So I just added those 3 lines, plot 1, 3, and 5. And of course, change some plot numbers here. Now they're all in sequence and they'll be plotted in this same order. Let me verify this. I don't have any errors. Don't see any errors right here at the bottom. Let me go ahead and switch over to my TradeStation to see what that did. I'm going to go over here, remove this indicator at the bottom because that's not the one that I created. Remember that I named it something different. I'm going to go here to studies, add studies, and let's go over to at MC. This is DMI status line. That's where it is. I'm going to click OK. So notice that the indicator changed the colors of the original indicator. Now it's using a darker blue. We don't see the yellow. The reason why it changed the colors is because we changed the plot numbers. And now any associated color that we had, the yellow for plot number 3, it's completely changed. But take a look at the status line over here. Even though it looks a little bit colorful because it just chooses a different color for all the plots, we can make modifications to that. Let me go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and double click on one of these lines. It'll take me to customize indicator, and let me go to style. I want you to take a look at what happens here in the list of plots. You see where plot 1, plot 3, and plot 5 don't have a name? That's because we skipped that part of the syntax. Any plot that has a name like ADX, DMI minus, DMI plus, it's very labeled. So how do we fix that? This sometimes leads to confusion because if you're modifying plot 1, is it really the plot that you're intending to change? Number 1. So if I go over here to my code one more time, and right here, inside every one of these expressions, I add a comma, and then I say, this is DMI, this is the plus text, that's my label. Then inside this one, minus, and this is the minus text. And for the ADX, comma, this will be ADX text. Those are labels, are intended to be labels to identify what is it that you're formatting or customizing. Let me verify this. All right, let me go back here to my TradeStation. And now if I go into the formatting dialog and I go to the style tab, take a look. Now I have clear labels. This is the plus text. This is the minus text. And this is the ADX text. Let's say, for example, I'm going to go here to the colors. For the DMI plus, the text is cyan, and I'm going to make the text, the line cyan. For the DMI minus text, I'll make it red. And for the line, I'm going to make it red too. And we're going to choose yellow for the ADX text as it was originally. And the ADX value will make it yellow also. Let me make that as a default. When you make the default here, it'll send those color assignments over to the main code so that you don't have to change it again if you apply the same study to a different chart. So that's a great two-way communication between the front-end indicator and the actual code, because you can format these styles on either side and apply the changes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and yes, and say okay. So now take a look that we're back on the DMI with the original colors. And if you look over here on the status line, I have my values correctly labeled. I can see that ADX is 1805, the DMI minus and the DMI plus are next to each one of the values that they corresponded to. So many times, if you need a little bit more clarity in the plot numbers or plot labels, you can do that. It works in many other indicators as well. If I go over here to studies and I add another study, let me show you another one that I think would be great for you to, for example, if you add a moving average 3-line, we have the 3 lines right here on the charts. Take a look over here. The only way that you can differentiate one from the other is from the color. You're not really sure which one is the faster or well, you can tell by which one is the one closest to the candlesticks. For example, the one that is yellow would be the faster calculated one, and the magenta would be the slower calculated one. But to a certain point, adding labels to these 3 numbers would make sense. And that way you can see which one's medium, fast, and slow. Those would be the 3 labels that I would add here so that it's very clear what those values refer to. They're going to remove that indicator here and go to my next example. We are going to do an example that provides you some alert messaging. So let me go ahead and remove my DMI right here from the bottom. And I'm going to start off with a simple moving average 2-line. So I'm going to go here to add study, moving average 2-line right here. There we go. Those are my 2-line moving average. I can see that there's a cyan line and a magenta line. If I'm looking at which one's closest to the candlesticks, the cyan is. So by deduction, I'm able to tell that's a fast moving average. But at the same time, this doesn't tell me what the mode of the moving averages are. Are they in a bullish mode or a bearish mode? Which one's higher? Which one's lower? I know that I can see it. I can see that the cyan is higher than the magenta. So this would be more of a bullish mode, but you can enhance that visual by adding those types of alert messages. Let me right click on my code, not my code, but my indicator itself. If you right click on any of the lines, you have this shortcut menu to the EasyLanguage document. I'm going to edit the EasyLanguage for the moving average 2 lines. This is in reference to my DMI. It's just letting me know that I made changes to the colors. And if you guys remember, I did go in there and change the defaults, right? So this is just letting me know, hey, something changed the defaults here, just be aware of it. Do you want to reload it? Yes. So that way it'll keep those same colors. I'm going to go back to this other tab, which is the one that I wanted to take a look at. I'm going to scroll down here and take a look at alerts, because alert settings are right here. But what I want, many of the items here, I don't necessarily use in my code, but we're going to leave it the way it is. I just want to add an additional plot. Now we're going to do this with a 3rd plot, because plot 1 is one of the lines, plot 2 is the 2nd line. So over here, I'm going to say plot 3 is going to be my, let's see, mode of my moving average. Actually, one thing, I'm breaking my own rule. I'm making modifications to the original. I'm going to Control Z out of this until I don't have any more changes. I can tell because I see not saved at the bottom. So what I do is I do Control Z until it is saved. So I went back, I've reverted all my changes to the saved version. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as a different one. Always remember to do that. If you're making modifications, you always want to come back to the way that these studies were. So I'm going to call this MA 2 lines. Just condense it like that. Moving average 2 lines. So I'm going to remove the word lines and just add status line right here. So I know that's the one that I created for the status line. Okay. So what I wanted to do is start off with something simple. Plot 3, and it will be the mode. And I'm talking about bullish or bearish mode. But before we add the mode, I just want to see, adding the label, what it does. And if I go back here to my TradeStation, let me remove this one, and let me go ahead and add it again. Not the same one, but the one that I created with a modification. That's going to be at MC M2A status line. This one right here. I'm going to click OK. So you can see that it's exact same indicator, but now over here on the status line, I have a word that says mode. Now the mode is going to depend on which one of the lines is higher than the other. So there's going to be some conditioning that's going to happen here for me to apply the right mode. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do is the following. Let me just make sure that we're doing this correct. All right. We're going to, let's see if we do this mode. Let's add some space here because we want to do some conditions. And we're going to say if fast average is right here used. I'm going to use the same word. If fast average is greater than slow average, I'm just copying and pasting, then begin. We're going to create a variable that switches and stores a value based on a condition, because yeah, we can hard code it here, but it's sometimes better to just add a variable that you can switch back and forth, because I can say M moving average mode. And let's add a underscore so it's easier to read. Moving average mode, and I'm going to say equals bullish. Notice that I'm also putting the word inside quotations so that it prints exactly how it is. So in plot number 3, we're going to plot MA mode, which is a string of text. Now, I haven't told EasyLanguage that I'm introducing this new word, and that's why we have to go back in here to the variable declaration statement so that EasyLanguage recognizes it. Okay, so I'm going to remove this semicolon at the very end, add a comma, and then add my new word. And the way that you initialize these text variables inside of EasyLanguage is by using a set of quotations. That way, it knows that whatever it's going to be stored in this variable is going to be a text string. Different than the fast average and the slow average. If you look at those two in comparison, those two don't have quotations. They only have a number. They have the number 0. So for EasyLanguage, those two variables are initialized as numeric variable. But if you want just to have a text variable, this is the way you initialize it, with a set of quotations. I'm going to end this variable declaration statement with a semicolon. And now I think I'm set. I just have to do the other side. I'm going to end this block statement. So I have 2 actions. If the fast is greater than the slow, 2 things happening. First, MA mode is bullish. Store that word inside of that. And then plot 3 mode. Okay. And maybe I don't need and else. Let's see if this works. No, if it's greater than, yes. MA mode and else begin. I think I'm missing a begin up here. So let's do begin. So if one is higher than the slow average, if the opposite has happened, meaning that the fast average is below, then MA mode equals bearish. Then we don't need, let me take the plot statement out of here, because then we can just do one statement and that's it. Okay, so this is cleaner. So if the fast is greater than the slow, then, and I take this begin, and MA mode equals bullish, and then else equals bearish. Let's see if this verifies. It does. This is a cleaner code because it doesn't become repetitive. So if the condition is true, then you're bullish. Else, you're bearish. So if this is not true, it's because the fast is below the slow, right? So that's the condition here. Now we just do the plot statement. I think this is a cleaner code. So plot 3, and what is it that we're plotting? We're plotting MA mode, which is text, and text will go right into the status line by default. It doesn't go inside of where the lines are. You need other type of syntax or EasyLanguage syntax to put text where the lines are. Whenever you plot text, like using this direct plot statement and plot text, it goes right into the status line. So this is MA, let's do mode. Okay, let's verify this, and it verifies successful. Let me go back here to my chart and see what it looks like. And here it is. On a chart where the fast average is above the slow, it says bullish. Let me change this to daily. Oh, I was looking at AT&T. See, on the daily chart, we're bearish. Why? Because the cyan is below the magenta. So it does switch back and forth depending on which one's bigger. I'm sorry, which one's higher and which one's lower. Of course, you can continue doing modifications to this. For example, I could change the color programmatically too. So let me go back here to my code, and here, this code, conditional code, can be a little bit more elaborate in the sense that I can add a begin like I had before. I can add a semicolon here and say set plot color of plot number 3, and I'm going to set it to, if it's bullish, it will be cyan, else, and then we have end, else, begin, and we have, if it's bearish, set plot color of plot number 3, we're going to do it red. So we added just a few more lines of text, but it'll provide you a way of switching the color of the word bullish and bearish to align with the mode. Before they were all yellow, bullish and bearish. Now it just enhances the visual because now bullish will be blue, bearish will be red. We can make that green if you want. Let's do green. Let's verify this. Okay, that verifies successful. Let me go back to my TradeStation. Now you can see bearish is red over here. If I go back to a 5-minute chart, then you can see that bullish is green. This enhances that visual. A lot of times you see everything on the chart, but it's all about how easy it is to identify the mode. Of course, you can add more text here if you wanted to. For example, if I come here and be a little bit more clear, I can type in the word mode with a colon, but then I have to, let's see if I can just do a plus here. Yep. If you add a plus the mode, it'll combine those two text expressions. So when I go back here to my chart, notice that it says mode bullish. Very easy to do, right? If it's bearish, let me go back here to a daily chart. Then you can see that the mode is bearish. Again, right here on top of my chart. In addition to that, I know that we have a few more minutes, but I also wanted to introduce the concept of adding additional calculated values. Now, a lot of times, yeah, the status line will continue to grow as you add more data. So you're going to have to make a decision as to what data points you want to keep in here. Maybe I want to remove the bid and ask, which I don't use. So if I double click on my background, I can remove the bid, the ask, and maybe the open and the high, because I can start adding my own values up here of things that I'm going to use. For example, this is the daily chart of AT&T. If you want to know what the ATR value is for AT&T, of course, we have a study for that. If you go to add study, let me just show you. We have average true range right here. Yeah. And then click OK. And that gives you the average true range of AT&T, which is 57 cents. You can see it right here on the right-hand side. Now, this occupies a whole big chunk of space on my chart analysis. What if I only wanted to add the ATR value up here and add that calculation right here on the top of my chart? Let's do that. I'm going to leave that here just as a reference, and I'm going to modify this indicator to include the ATR calculation. You do need an indicator, though, for it to show up here on the status line. That's one of the things that are the requirement. You need an indicator. But since I already have an indicator, which is the moving averages, I can just add the ATR calculation in it so that it shows up there. How do I do that? I have my plot 3 already there. Let me do a plot number 4. Plot 4. And this plot will be ATR, colon, and then a space. Now I do have to connect the ATR with a calculated value. Now the average, the ATR function is average versus AVG true range. That's the function that calculates average true range, and it needs a 14. What it needs to tell you, you need to tell it how many bars to calculate the true range for. It's a very straightforward function. There are hundreds of different functions in TradeStation that provide simple calculations like this. The only problem with this is that I cannot combine text, which is whatever's inside the quotations, with a number. If I try to verify this, let me just do this for a moment. Let me just close the parenthesis here and add a semicolon. If I try to verify this, it highlights my expression right here, and it says operation not supported for these data types. is mixing text with numbers. There is a very useful reserved word inside of EasyLanguage that turns a number into a string, that converts the number into like text. And that way I can then add my ATR text to something that is a text. That reserved word is num to string. There we go. Yeah, num to string. It's number, turning a number to a string. And it's abbreviated, NUMTOSTR. You don't have to capitalize the N, the T, and the S because EasyLanguage is not case sensitive. But visually, I like to capitalize the first letter of every word because it just makes sense, more sense in my head. I'm going to open up parentheses, and whatever I'm turning into a string is the calculated of the average true range. Okay, so that is, and for the num to string, you have to tell it how many decimal places to allow. Okay, so average true range for 14, 2 decimal places, and I think that'll do it. Let me verify this. Okay, I am missing a parentheses. Yeah, because I have open parentheses here and open in the outs and closing in the outside. Opening parentheses here, then I have the second closing parentheses, opening and open. Just make sure that you have the same number of opening parentheses to closing parentheses, and that way it won't say, oh, you're missing a parenthesis here. Okay, so yeah, remember that 2 decimal places for the num to string, and then whatever calculated numeric value or numeric value inside of it. Let's see if that plots on my chart. Let me go back here to my chart. There it is, ATR 57. So now I can remove this indicator that I have here at the bottom, and the ATR calculated value shows up there. Very useful. And the same way that you calculate ATR, if you want to calculate stop prices or targets based on whatever calculation, I did an example in one of my classes using the ATR and say, I want to calculate a stop price based on the low of today's bar. Let's do that. Let me go over here very quickly so you can see another example. Plot 5 is going to be my stop price, which is going to be, how do we calculate a stop price? First of all, we need the num to string. That way we can convert the formula. And the formula is going to be the low of the day minus the AVG true range. Let me just ensure that I spell this correctly for 14 bars. But we're going to take this true range and maybe multiply it by 2, maybe 2 ATRs. That's why I'm multiplying by 2. So low minus the average true range for 14. Okay, this is the whole expression. Then we have to specify the 2 decimal places. Don't forget the 2 decimal places or any number of decimal places. It can be 0 because it's a requirement for num to string. So num to string is open parentheses, provide the value that you want to turn into text, and then specify how many decimal places that text should have. Okay, let me see if this works. I think I'm missing a parentheses, but let's just make sure. It says, okay, parentheses expected here. Let's add it. Okay, and there we go. Now, if I go back here to my TradeStation, you can see that I can have my stop price right here at 26.18. Where did it get 26.18 from? Well, from the low of today's bar. The low of today's bar is 27.32, and then it's subtracted twice or 2 times the ATR, which is 57 cents. That's how we reach the stop price. So at any given moment, if you want to have visibility as to what the calculated value of a stop price would be based on ATR, this is exactly it. Makes it very simple for me to be on, for example, chart trading. Let's say that I'm trading 8. Okay, this is my chart. And if let's say, for example, that I buy at market. Order filled. And then when I set a stop, I can do, that stop would be at 26.18. If I want to put it down here, 26.18, there we go. So now I have a stop in place at 26.18, which matches my stop price up here, 2 ATRs from the low of today. Interesting. Okay, that's what I had for you guys today, and gals, if any ladies are connected. Let me go ahead and show you, or at least share with you, some of the snippets of code that I wrote today. I know that this is the one for DMI. These are all the changes that I made. Okay. And for the moving average, what I did is this is all that I did. These are the snippets of code that I created. If anybody needs additional information or would like me to send a copy of the study over to you, please send us an email at education@tradestation.com. And that way I'm always accessible, maybe not the same day, but I'll make sure to respond with any questions you guys have on some of the content that we provide, okay? Thank you guys for sharing this time with me. Thank you for being part of the TradeStation family. And I look forward to seeing you in one of my future classes. Goodbye, everyone. Great seeing you.